Pete, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you so much for calling.
Hey, Larry. I just wanted to tell that Mark, as far as I know, when Trump was in office the first time, between he and Wilkie, they did things that nobody else had ever done for the vets. These guys were traveling an hour and a half, 2.5, 3 hours. I mean, it was unbelievable. And Trump turned around. He's the only president, if I'm correct, that allowed them to go to their neighborhood doctors,
right? Their
local doctors. Okay.
That's right.
Number two, just because you have throw money at the situation, does that necessarily mean you're going to have qualified staff to work at a VA hospital? I've always heard that, you talk to 10 vets, and 5 of them will say they love their VA, and 5 of them say it's horrible. The other thing, too, is Trump has a lot of ex-military around him, a lot of people he's worked very close with.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to shortchange the vets. He's going to hear all about it. Plus, the media is going to excoriate him if he shortchanges the vet. They're just licking their chops for an issue like that. So, I'd write down the pros and cons on a piece of paper, Mark, before you open your mouth.
Well, Jay, thank you. Pete, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Meanwhile, over on CNN, they have a lawyer named Elie Honig, who often says very sensible things. And he talked about Donald Trump and the lawsuits that have been filed against Donald Trump, and how Donald Trump feels that some of the laws that have interfered with his ability to run the executive branch are illegal. There's nothing wrong with filing a lawsuit claiming that a certain law impinges on the separation of the branches. And here's what Elie Honig said. Very sensible. Number 9.
A federal judge has just ruled tonight that President Trump's firing of the National Labor Relations Board chair was illegal. In a scathing decision that came out, we heard from the U.S. District Court Judge Beryl Howell, who wrote, quote, "An American president is not a king, not even an elected one, and his power to remove federal officers and honest civil servants like plaintiff is not absolute, but may be constrained in appropriate circumstances as present here." It's the third time in less than a week that we've seen a federal judge rule that President Trump's firing of independent agency heads is unlawful. My top legal source tonight is CNN's senior legal analyst, Elie Honig. And Elie, what did you make of the ruling? Were you surprised by this?
Not surprised at all, Caitlin, because most fundamentally, Donald Trump broke the law, and he doesn't even contend otherwise. Now, Congress passed a law saying that this particular NLRB official can only be removed if there's notice and a hearing and good cause. Trump didn't care. He just said you're fired without regard to any of those things. But the key thing to keep in mind here is Donald Trump is not playing for the district court, the trial court, where we were today. He's playing for the Supreme Court, and he knows that this case or one of the other firing cases is going to make its way up to the Supreme Court, where he will argue that it's unconstitutional for Congress to pass those kind of laws because he's in charge of the executive branch, and he will argue he can do what he wants within the executive branch. Would not surprise me to see the Supreme Court take one of those cases. Would not surprise me to see Trump win in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, obviously, everyone's been watching Justice Amy Coney Barrett, especially when it comes to how she sided with the other justices on the USAID funding. But on this tonight, what Judge Howell did right is at one point, she said the president who touts an image of himself as a king or as a dictator, perhaps as his vision of effective leadership, fundamentally misapprehends the role. She accuses him of exactly what you're laying out there. A court to test the presidency and the limits of it.
I think that is an overstatement by the judge, and frankly, a misstatement of Donald Trump's actual legal argument in this case. I think the judge is actually getting quite political there in a way that undermines her credibility. Donald Trump is making a perfectly reasonable good faith argument that as the elected head of the executive branch, he controls the executive branch. That is very much in dispute. That's a reasonable argument to make. That's not the same thing as saying he's a king, or in another part of the decision, the judge even refers to his comments that he's a dictator. That's outside stuff. That's political. I think it was inappropriate and not even correct for the judge to characterize it that way.
That was Caitlin Collins to whom he said that. It looked like she'd been smacked in the head with a 2x4. That stuff in there about he's not a king, he's not a dictator, is completely unreasonable for a judge to say. The first time a president was impeached was Andrew Johnson. He succeeded Abraham Lincoln after Lincoln was assassinated. You know why he was impeached? He was impeached because he fired a cabinet member and Congress had passed a law after the death of Abraham Lincoln saying that you cannot fire a cabinet official without approval of Congress. He felt that that law violated the separation of powers, and he ultimately was impeached. He was not convicted, but he was impeached. He made exactly the same argument, that I run the executive branch. I can get rid of people if I want to get rid of them, for cause or for no cause. And ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to rule on this, and I believe that Donald Trump will prevail. Thanks for watching these clips from The Larry Elder Show. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment. More thought-provoking discussions are just a click away, so stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next one.